The laughter carried farther than the wind that whipped across the mountain ridge, sharp and cruel, echoing against stone and snow. They stood below her cabin, pointing at the rough circle of rocks she had stacked beside her door, calling it foolish, outdated, and useless for a modern winter. No one believed that a poor woman living alone on a mountain could outthink storms that had killed stronger men. What they did not know was that when the deadliest winter in decades came roaring down from the sky, that mock stone stove would become the line between life and death. Before the story continues, take a moment. If you believe in silent heroes and second chances carved quietly through patience and faith, please like this video, comment, share it with someone who believes resilience still matters, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Her name was Margaret Hale, a Christian woman in her early 60s living high in the Rocky Mountains of the United States, where isolation was not a choice but reality. Margaret had lived there most of her life, first with her husband, then alone after a sudden heart attack, left her widowed in the same winter that took their savings with medical bills. The mountain cabin was all she had left, built by hand decades earlier, surrounded by pine trees and silence. People often asked why she did not leave. Margaret never had a simple answer. The mountain was where her faith had been tested and strengthened. It was where she felt closest to God. Living that high came with dangers most people underestimated. Power lines failed often. Roads closed without warning. Modern heating systems broke easily in sub-zero temperatures, and repair crews rarely reached that far up the slopes. Margaret had learned the hard way that survival depended on preparation, not convenience. Years earlier, after a winter storm nearly froze her pipes solid, she began studying old methods, reading journals from early settlers and mountain families who survived without electricity or gas. That was when she decided to build the stone stove. It took her 2 summers to complete. She hauled rocks herself, one at a time, stacking them with care, sealing gaps with clay and ash mixtures she learned to make from old manuals. The stove sat partly inside the cabin and partly outside, absorbing heat from burning wood and holding it for hours, slowly releasing warmth even after the fire died. It was ugly by modern standards, bulky and rough, but it worked. The neighbors, few as they were, laughed openly. They told her she was wasting energy on something primitive. Some said she was stubborn. Others said she was lonely and losing sense. Margaret listened quietly and kept working. She believed wisdom was often hidden in old ways, and she trusted conviction placed in her heart. The winter arrived early that year. Snow fell heavier than usual, burying trails and freezing streams solid. Weather reports warned of a massive storm system, the kind that came once in a generation. Temperatures were predicted to drop to levels unseen in decades. Margaret stocked firewood, sealed windows, and prayed nightly for protection. When the storm hit, it did not creep in. It attacked. Winds howled like living creatures, ripping branches from trees and hurling ice against the cabin walls. The power went out within hours, plunging the mountain into darkness. Down below, families lost heat, generators failed, and emergency lines flooded with calls that could not be answered. Margaret stayed inside, feeding her stone stove carefully, watching it glow softly as it absorbed and held the fire's strength. As the storm intensified, roads vanished beneath drifts taller than trucks. Helicopters could not fly. Temperatures dropped so low that metal snapped and fuel gelled useless. Margaret rationed food and wood, trusting the stove to do what she built it to do. Even when the fire burned low, the stones radiated warmth, steady and faithful, keeping the cabin livable through nights that could have killed her. 3 days into the storm, she heard something unexpected. Knocking. At first she thought the wind was playing tricks, but the sound returned weak and desperate. Margaret opened the door to find 2 neighbors barely standing, their faces pale, their hands shaking violently. Their modern heating systems had failed. Their insulation cracked under the cold. They had walked through the storm because they remembered the stone stove they once mocked. Margaret did not hesitate. She brought them inside, wrapped them in blankets, and guided them close to the stove. The heat seeped into their bodies slowly, painfully, but it worked. Over the next 2 days, more people arrived. A young couple with a newborn, an elderly man with frostbitten fingers, a family whose generator caught fire, Margaret opened her door every time. The cabin became a refuge. People took turns sleeping, praying, sharing what little food they had. The stone stove never failed. It held warmth through the coldest nights, its steady heat a quiet miracle born of patience and belief. Margaret barely slept, tending the fire, whispering prayers, watching lives cling to warmth one breath at a time. When the storm finally passed, it left devastation behind. Several cabins were destroyed. Some homes were unlivable. News crews later called it one of the deadliest mountain storms in state history. Rescue teams reached the ridge days later and found something unexpected. Margaret's cabin still stood strong, smoke rising gently from the stone stove. Inside were survivors who should not have made it. The story spread quickly. The same people who once laughed now spoke her name with reverence. Experts examined the stove, calling it ingenious, a perfect example of thermal mass heating forgotten by modern design. Margaret accepted none of the praise easily. She believed she had only listened, prepared, and trusted. Her life did not suddenly become easy. Repairs were slow. Supplies remained scarce. But something changed inside the community. People began rebuilding smarter, learning from old wisdom, sharing resources instead of mocking difference. Margaret helped where she could, teaching others how to build similar stoves, reminding them that survival was not about pride, but humility. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that quiet preparation and faith can save lives, please engage with this video by liking it, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps these stories of resilience reach others who need hope. Spring eventually softened the mountain. Snow melted. Flowers returned. Margaret often sat beside her stone stove, now cool and silent, resting her hands on its surface with gratitude. She never rebuilt it for recognition. She built it because she listened when others laughed. Before the story ends, please comment below and share what moment moved you the most. Someone reading your words might find courage to trust their convictions even when they stand alone. Because sometimes, the strongest shelter is not made of approval or praise, but faith, patience, and the courage to build what others do not yet understand.